Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam, or should I say welcome to the jungle that is behind me. This is an area that's close to my house. It's not far from my house, where non-native plants have just kind of run amok. And I wanted to walk through and show you some of these, and then show you how, I get a lot of questions on the channel about how to control these things that are non-natives, that are very aggressive. And unfortunately, there's not a great answer for this. I'll show you a few things at the house after I walk through and show you some of these invasive plants and show you how I'm dealing with it. But again, it's an ongoing battle. This happens especially in older neighborhoods like this, where, a lot of these plants were planted 80 years ago before people, realized that some of these plants were very invasive. Through plant breeding, I do want to say in this video that through plant breeding, we are seeing a lot of these old, non-native invasive plants, through breeding, where we're, like in butterfly bushes, where we see seed-free butterfly bushes and other plants. A lot of work being done on this to keep some of these, what were great ornamental plants, from doing this. Unfortunately, these were let out of the bag a long time ago, and they're very well adapted to the area. So again, let's get started. Obviously, English ivy. English ivy growing in trees. I've got an oak at the house. We'll take a look at it in a few minutes, where, it's climbing an oak, and I need to get it cut out of the oak. This plant down here on the bottom, this is a particularly aggressive one, called fig buttercup, is the common name for it. It gets yellow flowers on it. This is a sea of yellow in this back garden space. If you're in Raleigh and you see this particular one, in the spring, which they've just finished flowering. If you see this particular one in the spring, the city actually wants to know about it. And they're trying to track this weed. It is particularly bad, and unfortunately prevents a lot of our early spring things from coming up in our woodlands, in our wet woodlands. So this one's particularly bad. Let's see, if we're moving down, we've got lots of Japanese ligustrum. So several different types of these that come up, but I was doing a consultation recently, and someone had been babying one of these like it was an actual ornamental plant, which again, it is a seedling of an ornamental plant, but we'll talk about getting rid of these things and get over to the house. There's many different types of liriope, but the one that's particularly Liriope muscari is the clumping liriope that most people use to line their paths and patios, and it's okay to use. This is Liriope spicata, and you can see it comes up by stolon, so it's just running through this bed. Unfortunately, it's in a sea of other invasives that are competing with it, but Liriope spicata is definitely one to avoid. And I can tell on Liriope spicata, I can tell if it's coming out of the bottom of the container. If you're buying liriope and it's coming out of the bottom of the container, avoid it. You want a clumping liriope. We've got Chinese wisteria growing. There is a native wisteria, but this is Chinese wisteria, and it's doing its thing, eating a holly that was planted here a long time ago. And we'll see one in bloom a little bit further down. Down here, this is a henbit or dead nettle. People call it. Of course, this isn't everyone's lawns. Nothing we can do about this one, but I thought I'd point it out since it happens to be volunteering itself for the video. That one produces lots and lots of seed here in the late winter or early spring. Again, lots and lots of this Japanese ligustrum coming up everywhere. We've got let's see, more of this liriope. And then you can see the Vinca major back here. Lots of people use Vinca as ground cover, then it just runs amok. That's what kind of happens with some of these, unfortunately, I think, is a maintenance issue. And when the maintenance stops, looking back into this back garden space, you can see that fig buttercup just covering the ground back there. It was full yellow a couple weeks ago, and it's actually quite beautiful. Unfortunately, though, any other plant that would have wanted to germinate during this period of time that it's up. It's a spring, it's a late winter, early spring perennial. It'll actually be dead. It'll die to the ground by June. It will be like it was never even here. But it can do that quickly. This is winter honeysuckle. It bloomed a few weeks ago, incredibly fragrant. Honestly, a great ornamental plant. Unfortunately though, you know, it gets loose and then it becomes very difficult to remove this plant. This plant suckers. If you digging this out of the ground, unfortunately takes many, many efforts because the roots will continue to come up. Let's see, we can't do an invasive video without Chinese privet. This one's not in the best of shape because it's got 7 other invasives competing with it. That's Chinese ligustrum. We've seen the Japanese ligustrum. This is Rose of Sharon. Again, you know, I don't want to bash Rose of Sharon too much because we've seen through plant breeding that, you know, we have seedless Rose of Sharon now. So make sure, you know, that's what you're buying. But this is, this is the cat's out of the bag on this. This is now, basically a native plant. And unfortunately, it comes up in the shade like this. It's never going to bloom very well. It's not going to be all that attractive. So here's wisteria in flower, which, you know, has, of course, amazing fragrance. You can tell everything in that pea family, you know, the flowers, you know, have this little keel up on top. Redbud, you know, which is native, is in the pea family. There's just gazillions of things in the pea family, but that flower usually helps you identify pea family plants, and it's growing up into that Chinese privet. So again, it's a competition amongst invasive plants here. There's a few things along this border. This is Elaeagnus pungens, which, you know, this is one of the most well-adapted plants I've ever seen to almost any space. It's incredible. It can vine like this. It can be a shrub like this. It's just an incredibly adaptive plant that, you know, it's a non-native invasive. Right next to it is another type of Elaeagnus called umbellata, which is flowers like crazy and has this. If you ever smelled Elaeagnus flowering, it's really almost over. It's very pungent. It's too sweet. An interesting one right here. We've got Elaeagnus pungens. We've got growing out of an Elaeagnus umbellata with a winter honeysuckle and a Japanese ligustrum as a bonus. We got 5 or 4 of invasives growing out of that same space, and English ivy growing not that far away from it as well. Oh, and of course bamboo has to be on the list. This is definitely one to be careful with. There's lots of spots in my neighborhood where, you know, a person planted it and has lost control over it over time. This is Nandina domestica, another plant that's actually being solved through plant breeding. We've got some Nandinas now. You know, they're great ornamental plants. Unfortunately, just the old Nandina domesticas are quite seedy and have become noxious weeds. I almost missed this one. This one's one of the worst of all, and you can see actually where it was cut down before. This is the thing about hard thing about battling some of these invasives is you cut them down, and now honestly it's probably, you know, more than it was before. They got to just be cut and cut and cut. But this is mulberry, or Chinese mulberry. Again, there's a native mulberry, but this is Chinese mulberry. The young foliage on this is very different than the mature foliage. But, you know, over time it kind of evolves. But when it's in its young stage like it is here, this is what it looks like. So I'm back over here at the house, and, you know, I didn't even talk about calorie pears, which is the Bradford pear hybrid. It's coming up in the woods everywhere, or Japanese stilt grass. That probably is just emerging at this point. But right here back at the house, this is what I'm fighting against. There's a giant Chinese privet on the neighbor's property over here that's got to be 15 to 20 feet tall. Beside it, nearly 40 feet tall, is a Japanese ligustrum. Behind it is a Photinia serratifolia, which is actually kind of an attractive Photinia. It gets big bunches of beautiful clusters of white flowers, kind of smelly. It's a beautiful plant, but again, very seedy and definitely invasive. There's an Elaeagnus back here. There's a mulberry here, and this is a more mature mulberry. You can see the difference in the leaf from what I showed you before. And let me show you the back line now. Here you can see the ligustrum coming up everywhere on my back line back here. Here's one that's trying to get its true leaves. Haven't even mentioned porcelain vine, which is just waking up right now. So this is another one. Actually a beautiful vine. Beautiful berries on this one in the fall, but he's just a terrible noxious weed. So the back line is as bad as anywhere. I do have a native magnolia growing back here, but you can see the ivy growing up the tree behind me and the forest floor of it back here. And again, Japanese ligustrum and literally everything that I just pointed out in this video growing back here in this wooded space that's behind me. I just took out the last of a fence that was back here, an old chain link fence. This is a temporary fence. And literally I'm putting posts in for a new fence. And in the process of this, I'm putting some wood chips back here, and I'm gonna put them pretty deep and create a bit of a border between my plantings and this invasive nightmare. I'm gonna get the ivy cut out of the tree so the seeds stop dropping directly into the landscape. And basically create a buffer back here that I can defend. You know, if you have a neighbor whose stuff's creeping into your place, you may want to leave a couple feet, you know, on that border where you can, you know, defend it and not have to pull the stuff out of your plants directly. But again, it's just tenacity. That's the only thing that that you can combat this with, because these things are just constantly seeding themselves back into my garden spaces. But again, I feel like if I put a buffer all the way around the place, at least it limits seed dropping directly into the landscape. I think you can see better back into here now, this invasive craziness that is right at the back of the property. Few things. Number one, like I said, plant breeding is really changing. You know, a lot of these plants over time, I think, will be tamed ornamentals again. And unfortunately, these ones that are out here, I mean, what do you call them? I mean, we would never be able to eliminate this. There's no possibility of that. Hopefully, some sort of, you know, generally, if something's in, you know, here long enough, some disease, some insect, something will balance this at some point. But currently, it's unchecked and not in balance at all. The reason I'm doing this video right now is because early in the year, it is definitely easier to get these things out of the ground. The ground tends to be softer. There's more moisture in the ground. The insects aren't as bad. The heat isn't as bad. And they're just flowering now. So things like this privet, you know, if I get them out now, you know, that prevents them from coming to seed this year. At least limits a few of the seeds that they're capable of producing. Same thing with this ivy. You know, I don't want it producing seed later on this year, which just literally rains down in the garden there. You know, keep in mind that one person's invasive plant is another person's perfectly fine ornamental. You know, we can grow butterfly bushes here without them getting seedy, really. But in the Pacific Northwest and in the UK, they're noxious weeds. Again, new varieties that are seed-free. So keep that in mind. And then, you know, I go up to Connecticut, and a burning bush and barberries are running amok through the ditches, and here we just don't see, you know, burning bush I have seen get seedy here, but I don't see it as an invasive plant. Despite the fact that they're planted all over the neighborhood, I don't see them coming up in the wooded area here. They do in the Northeast. So look online for your state and see which, you know, plants are considered invasive in your state, because like I say, one thing will play nice somewhere else that here just takes over our wooded spaces. So there you go. I just thought I would cover some of these, you know, invasive plants that have thoroughly gotten out of control in areas of the city here in Raleigh, and I'm sure you guys have them something in your area. Let me know down below what's the most invasive, problematic weed in your area. Thanks for watching.